well, Shabbat Shalom, everybody that's joining us.
Father, we come to you today. We thank you for your special day, your holy Shabbat that you set apart for us. And we just ask that you help us to keep our ways that's in line with your ways, that we keep that Shabbat and that we keep your commandments. We want to be set apart people. We want to be your bride at the end of all this. We just ask that we pray that you bless Leanne when she goes out, and that when she goes to talk to the manager, he's totally receptive of everything, and that he's just happy to have her, and he sees what a good and loyal employee she is. But we are going to miss her.
Yes.
So we ask that today, when we're delving deeply into your word, that you have revelations for us, that you show us things that we have not discovered before. You open up our hearts, our minds, and our eyes, that we see your heart and your teaching that you want us to have. In your name we pray.
Amen. All right, so this week's Torah portion is Shemini. And what does it mean? Eight. And it is Leviticus chapter 9, 1 through, what was it? 11:47. This Torah portion is amazing.
They all are.
They all are. I know. I say that a lot, don't I? Whoa, there's never enough time to study it all out. So, Father, show us exactly what you want us to hear today. What parts you want us to focus on. Amen.
Amen.
So let's go over to Leviticus chapter 9, and it's broken up in a couple different things. First off, it starts out in chapter 9 where they begin all the preparations of the sin offering, the guilt offering, the burnt offering, the peace offering, and the meal offering, the grain offering. They put them, all of these, and they get them prepared, and they lay them out on the altar. And then Moses and Aaron goes into the tabernacle. They come back out. It doesn't say what they did in the tabernacle. It just means they came. Wait a minute. Did I get ahead of myself? I think I got ahead of myself. I did get ahead of myself. No, they did. Oh, yeah. Okay, they did. They go into the tabernacle, and when Moses and Aaron come back out, what happens? The fire falls. The fire falls, and it consumes everything that's been laid out on the altar. But then we see a continuation of the story, and we get the Nadab and Abihu situation. What happened to them? Anybody, real quick?
They brought a strange fire and got
Strange fire. They got consumed. Uh-oh. So we have this situation. What does Dad do when he sees his sons? I mean, what do you do if you see your sons die right before you? Luann. Uh-huh.
Okay, so they did the wrong thing, and they made a mistake, they got hurt to a grip. Are they spending their eternity in hell? Or are they still with the Lord?
That's a really good question.
And we're waiting on a really good answer.
So yeah, Joy, you got some thoughts on that? Because I want to go into that, but here in a little while. But but yeah, go ahead and throw it out.
So it says offered unauthorized fire before Yehovah. So I think that means that they got to him. They got to him. And it doesn't really say that he was able to, or he didn't say anything. He just consumed them. I just don't think that that's the case because they were drawn near to him, and I guess the protocol they hit on, and it's so very important. But I think that's just a lesson for us that we need to try to do the protocol as well, not whatever that is, for
Okay.
these days. I mean, we're in a temple, but you know what I'm saying, to come before
Okay.
the Lord, not flippantly, I guess,
Yeah.
or inebriated or whatever, because there's lots of different.
There's lots of different. We'll
Yeah.
talk about some of that here in a little
Yeah,
bit. The different thoughts on it.
What happened or what they did.
Yeah.
They were before him. They were there. They drew near to him.
Uh-huh.
And they just messed up. So
Yeah.
I believe they're there with him now.
Okay.
I'm sorry, that's just.
Okay. So them being consumed may not necessarily be a salvation issue, but it certainly was a consequence of them violating the protocol. All those are dead and waiting the resurrection.
Would you put that in the
Okay.
same category as when they touched the
Yes.
ark?
Yeah, so that's because that's what the Haftorah is
He
talking
went to
about.
protect,
Right.
try to catch it and protect it,
Yeah,
but was consumed as well.
similar. Yeah, very, very similar. Yeah, protocols, very, very important. Yeah, Terry.
I think they became.
They became an offering. Well,
They were totally consumed.
they were consumed. But let me ask you this. You can look at it that way. But does the Father want human sacrifices? Does that fit his protocol? There is only one human, but part human, part man, part God, that was the perfect sacrifice, Yeshua the Messiah, not a full human being sacrifice, but he laid his life down. All right, so
Wasn't burnt.
he wasn't burned. Yeah, he wasn't laid on an altar, so to speak. It's true. Okay, Twyla and then Tracy.
I think God allowed this or did this because the guy that did the wood, he picked up the wood. He's not messing around with his protocol, and he can't get their attention by knocking on the window. He's got to do something that's gonna to wake them up.
Okay.
And what he's wanting from us is total love, total give everything to him.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Utmost.
The
And,
most.
whether that's, God has a lot of mercy.
Okay.
I'm not gonna.
So no shortcuts, no working around and putting our little dabble do it into the midst of what God said do it this way.
If he says, go to the, whatever, at 10 minutes after 2, he doesn't mean for you to show up at 3:15.
Okay. All right. Very good. Tracy and then Daryl.
I just was going to question, so if we know that he does not require human sacrifice, where does that come into play for so Abraham followed everything. So where in that, was that told, because with him being told to sacrifice Isaac, and if we're not supposed to sacrifice humans, where does that,
Okay.
where does that come into?
Yeah.
If he knew the commands, where does that fall in there?
Yeah. So
That's a question I haven't been able to.
yeah. Chris, you had the thought on that?
Yeah, I mean, if he knew the word, he also knew the Father's voice. He did the same thing as the Father. He went on faith, and I know you're raising me. Keep your promise. So, in his mind, he was already gone. He was already dead. But the thing about the sacrifices, he wasn't going to allow that to happen because he says that you don't do no human sacrifices, along with the no cannibalism, anything, even the things that eat meat. It's all falls under the same category.
We just go back to the verse where when Isaac asked where the sacrifice is, and he said that y'all will provide.
Right.
That's exactly what I was about ready to say.
Okay.
Yeah, because so Abraham was told what to do. But think about it. He was told to go through it step by step by step. Our thought process was that he was going to completely run that dagger through. And I'm going to say this. I'm just going to say this. When Abraham was, I mean, it's such a really good point. These all things tie in together. And Abraham bound Isaac to the altar. What does that mean when you bind the offering? So when you bind, if you're going to take a lamb or another animal, you would be binding its legs together so it can't fight, right? And then how do you sacrifice a lamb or a ram? So Abraham, we get it in our Western mindset, taking up a dagger, get ready to run it through. Actually, it was to cut his throat, lifting up his hand, going to cut his throat. And that's when he got stopped. So he was bound on the altar, hands were tied, legs were tied. And then the picture was, okay, that's enough. It's going to be recorded because this is what my son will do. When his hands are bound to that tree and his feet are bound to that tree, and that he will have that crown of thorns like the ram caught in the thicket. Here's the picture, Messiah. You've done it. You gave now all generations to come what to look for. Here on this mountain, Mount Moriah, that the Son of Man will come and be bound. And he will be the perfect sacrifice. Yeah.
Something else about Isaac, when the lamb is slain, they have to extend the head so they can get the right positioning on the throat.
Mm-hmm.
So I really feel like Abraham was probably at Isaac's head, extending it back.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you know, one thing that Richard Thomas had brought to the congregation and talked about lambs and sheep, that when they will willingly stretch their neck out for their throat to be cut. It's instinctive. Isn't that very, very interesting? Willingly they give their life.
They know the shepherd or who's doing it, or
It's a very good question. Very good question. Trust.
looking at them.
Yeah.
And
Probably
also
looking you
that
straight-
would put Abraham in the correct position. Because if you're standing to the side, you're not gonna get a good position
Mhm.
and leverage.
Yeah.
As if you're more at the head, then you have better positioning and leverage.
Yeah. It's really, and then the other thing is we recognize this because this is in Leviticus chapter 9, where it says to Aaron, he said to Aaron, take for yourself a calf, a bull for a sin offering, and a ram for a burnt offering, both without defect, and offer them before Yahweh. Then to the sons of Israel you shall speak, saying, take a male goat for a sin offering, and a calf and a lamb, both 1 year old, without defect, for a burnt offering. The offering was not just for the priesthood, for their preparation for themselves, for the dedication of the tabernacle and the process that's going on here, but it is also for all of Israel. And so when Israel, you want to bring a burnt offering and you bring a ram, if you bring the guilt offering and you bring a lamb and whatever these other protocols are, one of these protocols, you do it yourself. The priest doesn't do it. Now think about that outstretched neck and that lamb looking up at you as you are about ready to cut its throat. Now, what does that do to one's psyche, knowing that I'm bringing this guilt offering before y'all, and this lamb who is innocent, without spot or blemish, is now taking my sin?
I think I would claw my eyes out.
Does that, would that not tell? I mean, think about this. You think about our society and our culture and all this stuff, and it's like people just give a grace, grace, grace. It's all under the blood. And you recognize the power of the blood of the lamb, and you're looking at it. Do you think we would treat sin as lightly as we do today if we had to bring our own?
No.
Yeah, Rick.
Getting back to Nadab and Abihu, I don't think that there's not an explanation from Yah on why this happened and everything. I think it was just meant to be that this is a lesson for you to learn. And much like when the man was gathering firewood on Shabbat, that seemed like a very severe deal for a violation like that.
Yeah.
And it caused, in the future, I think that is one of the things that set the groundwork for the Pharisees with all of their rules and everything, saying, well, you see what happened there. You're not supposed to do any of this stuff. So, but it was a lesson from Yah you need to pay attention to the details, what I'm telling you to do. The thing that you need to learn is in the details. And when they didn't do that, they suffered the consequences, but they learned. So he didn't seem like he felt obligated to tell them, well, this is what happened, and this is why that happened, everything. It was just like, okay, now you learn.
Yeah. Okay. Linda.
It's the same, all the examples, all the readings for today point to the same thing like Rick's saying, because in the writings, prophets in the writings, it's about Uzziah reaching out his hand to the ark and touching it, and the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
God struck him. And what I got out of the whole thing was just the fact that we cannot approach him, like Twyla was saying, we cannot approach him by our protocol. It has to be his protocol, and everything about him is holy. And that holiness, there's a standard to that holiness that we have to uphold. And even, it scares me when I read it, because it just shows you how easy it is. And just a simple wrong thing.
Mhm.
And so him giving us these examples, and you saying too, Pastor, that how lightly we take our sin these days.
Mm-hmm.
And knowing what we know, it's very sobering to me. It's really something that kind of smacked me upside the head.
Yeah. Okay.
We need to really watch it. We need to fear him. We need to fear him, and I think these are really good examples of it.
You've brought out, y'all, every one of y'all have brought out some really good points, and it brings me to another thought. I'm going to see if I can find it in the book of Revelation, and talking about the two witnesses. Okay. Yeah, this is really good because I think it really relates. Y'all, this is okay. I know we seem like we're going around the subject of the Torah study, but this is really part of the essence of the Torah study. And I'm going to bring it back to the Torah study here after we talk about this. So if you go over to Revelation chapter 11 with me, because my expectation is that the two witnesses are going to come on the scene pretty soon. I mean, I think I think we are within a very short window of time. Personally, this is my belief that possibly even possibly, I'm not saying it is, that even within the next 12 months, that the two witnesses could show up on the scene. I do.
What was your question, George? If he thought that we were in Jacob's middle now. Oh.
Yeah. We see all sorts of things happening around us. You know, look at this. Isn't one of the seals talk about a loaf of bread for a day's wages? Well, over the last year, the overall cost of food's gone up at minimum 20%. Many cases, 50%. And prices that you haven't seen change, the boxes got smaller.
Right.
Right?
Or the contents of those boxes got smaller.
Yes. Yeah. So let's go over here to the two witnesses. And so in other words, I'm saying it's costing us more. Our wages are getting shorter and shorter for the cost, comparison. So let's look at this. There's so many parallels. Even as we get started here, we got some Ezekiel parallels going on, and we have some others. It says, and there was given me, starting with verse 1, a measuring rod like a staff. And someone said, rise and measure the temple of God and the altar and those who worship in it, and leave out the court which is outside the temple, and do not measure it, for it's been given to the nations, and they will tread underfoot the holy city for 42 months. So that's a direct reference to Zechariah 4:14. It takes us over to Ezekiel in the 40s, somewhere in chapter 44. I think it was Ezekiel was told to measure out the temple. Verse 3, and I will grant authority to my two witnesses, and they will prophesy for 1,260 days, clothed in sackcloth. These are the two olive trees and the two lampstands that stand before the Lord of the earth. Now, again, a reference back to Zechariah. If anyone desires to harm them, fire proceeds out of their mouth and devours their enemies. And if anyone would desire to harm them in this manner, he must be killed. These have the power to shut up the sky in order that rain may not fall during the days of their prophesying. And they have power over the waters to turn them into blood and to smite the earth with every plague as often as they desire. So this is very interesting because one thought is that we were talking about how Yod He Vav He is spelt forwards all the way up to the halfway through the book of Leviticus, and the other side of the book of Leviticus going through Deuteronomy, Yod He Vav He in the equal letter spacing in the Torah code is printed backwards. So they both all point towards the middle, which the middle is in this Torah portion. And how the plagues, when do the plagues happen? Is it after the greater Exodus, after the sound of the shofar and the bride is sequestered into a secret place for a time period? I'm not talking rapture, but I am talking about being gathered at Har Sinai. So anyway, that's a whole nother subject. But what comes out of their mouths? Fire. So those that oppose them, what are they?
They're sacrificed.
They're consumed, not sacrificed. They're consumed because they are speaking against the prophets. Do not touch my anointed. Or you can say it this way. Those prophets are speaking the word of God, and they're speaking against that word. And so there's a protocol of consumption. Now, take it back to Abihu and Nadab. What happens? What did they do?
Other than offer profane fire,
What caused the fire to come down to consume them?
they approach God in an own.
They violated the protocol. So see, there's a tie-in, there's a connection between the two. I would suggest that there'll be a day and an hour that this time of making up our own protocols and still calling it worship will cease, because people are bringing all sorts of stuff into the sanctuary, so to speak. So let's look at another. Here's another thought. Did I see a hand? Someone was going to say something before I move on. Okay. All right. Go back to Leviticus, since we're talking about it, in Leviticus chapter 10. Someone read verse 1 and 2.
But Nadab and Abihu, sons of Aaron, each took his censer, put fire in it, laid incense on it, and offered unauthorized fire before Adonai, something he had not ordered them to do. At this, fire came forth from the presence of Adonai and consumed them, so that they died in the presence of Adonai.
Okay,
Moshe
that's good.
said to Aaron,
That's good. So, so what are these fire pans?
They're like the censers, like incense censers.
Yeah, incense, right? So what coals did they use to put the incense on to create smoke? Okay. All right. There's a huh? It's supposed to be from the coals from the altar. So yeah, Terry. That's in Leviticus 10, 1 and 2. So the fire pans, by the way, the Hebrew word is machta. Put it on the board if y'all want to. You're writing, taking notes. Machta. And that's fire pans, so the censers, okay? And it's related to the word machita. And that is the word that means destruction. Now, how many know in the Hebrew language you can get two sides to a story? One that's positive and one that's negative when you look at a Hebrew word. Okay, so what is the upside of destruction? They have these censers, fire pans. Whose Bible says censers? Okay.
Mine says censers.
Yours says censers. Spell that for me. C-E-N?
C-E-N-S-E-R.
S-E-R. Okay. As opposed to censor.
Yeah.
Okay. So those are the same word. Machta. Then you put this. So they're putting incense into the machta, into these fire pans. It creates smoke, and smoke is part of the common, not the common, but the temple protocol of when they go inside the tabernacle, and they, you've got the altar of incense, but you're also bringing the smoke, you're bringing it through. How can destruction be positive?
It's a cleansing.
It's a cleansing. So it's
Just like the flood,
it's like the flood. Yeah, flood can be negative and positive.
because he did that to save. I mean, it was a bad thing to some, in their opinion, but that was actually to save.
It was to save humanity. Yeah.
Brings back
new life.
Yeah. Well, right.
Brings back new life.
Brings back new life. Exactly. So now on the negative side, it meant their destruction. So the flood preserved life. It was the destruction of all those who failed to follow the protocols of God. Okay. The people that were destroyed. Why were they destroyed? Disobedient. it relates to mixture. Mixture. Think about the two witnesses. When fire comes out of their mouth, who are they consuming? Those are saying, we don't like your protocol. We should do it in a different way. Except they're probably being blatant in their face. But why? Because they're full of mixture. Well, we like a little dab of this. We like a little dab of that. It kind of it all gives us images of the God that we want. Right? As a God, as opposed to the God who is. Rick.
So where it says that they're consumed, could that possibly be like an electrical deal? Not just fire, but like an electrical deal that did that? Because it says that they carried them in their tunics out to outside of camp. If that was just a fire, it would have burned those tunics up.
Well,
So that was the impression that it left.
Well, it doesn't say that their clothes were consumed, but they're wearing their priestly garments, which is linen.
Which is linen, which would have protected the linen.
So there could have been this, whatever that discharge was, the linen was not consumed, but they were. It doesn't mean that they were consumed to ashes. It just means that they had a bolt that killed them.
And that's what touching the ark when Isaiah touched the ark to steady it. It was because the way the ark was created, there is a static electricity protecting that ark. And if you do not have on your linen gloves, even that's why electricians wear linen lined gloves, is to protect them. It'll kill you.
Okay, really good point. Very good point. We'll tie that in here in just a moment. Let's keep that thought. So it says, after putting fire in them, not specified, placed incense on it and offered strange fire before Yahweh. That word strange is zoor. Zoor. Strange fire. It means or it's equal to Zoor, committing adultery.
So what is acceptable fire? What's the word for it?
That is a very good question. Acceptable fire. So though I don't know what the word is for it, but what ignited the fire that was on the altar? Where did that fire come from? From Yah. He sent fire from heaven and it was consumed. And that's how the fire got started. They didn't bring their little Zippo or their little Bic lighter or the one with the long nose, they didn't bring one. So it was a perpetual fire that had to be kept going, and that original fire came from heaven. So now we have a fire that's initiated from God, and everything that it belongs to God is holy. It is devoted to Him. Now you go take fire from your campsite and use it for His protocol, then where did that fire originate? From the Zippo. And think about it this way, out of my own strength. That fire got started because, especially in that day, they didn't have Zippos. So they took their little fire starter, whatever it was, their little pole, that post, and they got it going, and they built their own little fire. It came from their own strength. It's strange to God. Yeah.
pretty commonplace in that time to use livestock manure for fires?
Yes.
Imagine that. You're gonna put that on the Father's altar if that's where it comes from?
So if it was non-wood, yeah, that would be very strange fire.
Yeah, no wonder. I'd be mad.
Yeah. So what they did by their very act, I know. I'll tell you what everybody else, what people have said over the years. But in essence, strange fire is they brought something into a relationship that was only reserved by God to be used. They brought mixture. They brought something in, and what they thought was right in their own eyes led to their own destruction. And so this is what's really interesting about this Torah portion, because I'm going to read 2 verses here in Leviticus chapter 10 and in Leviticus chapter 11. Starting with read verses 9 and 10, it says, "Do not drink wine or strong." This is Yahweh speaking to Aaron and saying, "Do not drink wine or strong drink, neither you nor your sons." This is why some people say, well, maybe they were drinking. "Neither you nor your sons with you when you come into the tent of meeting, so that you may not die. It is a perpetual statute throughout your generations." Verse 10, "And so as to make a distinction between the holy and the profane, between the unclean and the clean." That is very, very key. In verse 11, "And so as to teach the sons of Israel all the statutes which Yahweh has spoken to them through Moses." So what is the lesson here? The lesson is to make a distinction between the holy and the profane, the unclean and the clean. Now let's jump over to chapter 11. Verses 46 and 47. "This is the law regarding the animal and the bird and every living thing that moves in the waters and everything that swarms on the earth, to make a distinction between the unclean and the clean, and between the edible creature and the creature which is not to be eaten." So what is the lesson?
Clean and unclean.
Clean and unclean, holy and profane. Now, what has been presented to Israel?
Yes.
This, yeah. I mean, it's like, whoa, because think about it. They've been worshiping the gods of Egypt. And there you have a mixed multitude that says, well, what's the difference? And I mean, after all, they made a golden calf. Well, 3,000 died, but there's a lesson that still was needing to be learned. And yeah, Tammy.
The very first code that I was going to attend, I didn't get to attend because I got really sick. But the theme for that sukkah was declaring or defending between holy and profane. You were drawing that line between the holy and profane. And this guy's name is Troy, and he was coming down on Tuesday nights teaching on declaring and defending that line. That was his teaching Bible study for Tuesday nights leading up to the Sukkot.
Yeah. Okay. Where does churchianity fall short today?
They don't know.
They don't know the distinction. What do they think is holy? I mean, tell me, what does the church today think what is holy? Pray over it. We prayed over it. It's blessed. Yeah. Christmas, Easter. Well, it's all about Jesus now, and it's not about their pagan roots because we blessed it with holy water.
They
Yeah.
totally miss the whole clean, unclean, holy, profane thing. They think when you try to talk to them about, eating clean or any of this stuff, they look at everything as a salvation issue. They think everything is about salvation. So when you try to talk to them about clean and unclean and being holy compared to not being holy,
They do.
Yeah, it's legalism because they think it's all wrapped together in that nutshell of the Old Testament. The Old Testament, right, they think it's a salvation thing.
Uh-huh.
Everything is in the umbrella of salvation, and it's not. This doesn't have anything to do with our salvation. It has to do with us being clean and holy and pure and how to walk out our salvation.
Yeah.
Because if you eat pork, they think, I can eat pork because it's not gonna go against my salvation. I'm not gonna go to hell if I eat pork.
Mhm.
So that's what I'm saying. They categorize everything under.
They make bigger decision make work.
Once saved, always saved.
Unsaved, always saved.
I heard a deal the other day that put that in perspective about for the folks that say everything's legalism, and the guy said, no, it's our responsibility. And I like that.
Yeah.
Our
Once
responsibility.
saved, always saved, and they ignore, if you love me, keep my commandments.
Yeah. Yeah. So here someone who has a salvation mindset, because I was raised in the Baptist church, and every single week it was a salvation message and a salvation altar call. And that's where they left it. There was very little discipleship. It was just another twist on salvation because everything is salvation. It's a very good point. So they go, and then once saved, always saved goes with it. So they lose this thought. What are we talking about? Destruction. Is it destruction now? Well, I did this thing and I didn't die. And I didn't lose my salvation because I'm all under the blood. So, but the thing is, when we look at the protocols, these protocols are not changeable. We can't change it because we want to change it. The word is what it is, and it just says what it says. And just because we are a little bit further down the road in terms of time, and so in that time, Yeshua did come, it doesn't mean that Yeshua didn't follow this to a T, because he did. He was blameless.
But he didn't evolve.
He did.
No, because no, what they say is, no, he died. That stopped it. When he died, that stopped everything. That's what that died us.
Yeah, it's
When he died, he did live to it until he died, and then after that, it was no more. And it makes no sense to me.
Yeah.
That thought process.
Yeah, right.
It makes sense to me.
It makes sense to him, but that's Roman thinking. That's how the Romans think. That's what they were taught from the Roman church, and what's been adopted by, all these denominations to still follow it. Chris.
Yeah, we were just having that conversation with somebody, and I just basically told him all the scriptures where it says that he took on the sins of the world. That he came to do that to reconcile us. I said, well, find me a verse that tells us the feast and the Shabbats and the commandments are a sin. That's all he took to the tree was sin. And that's because we're supposed to keep the word of God from the beginning to the end. And
Right.
it endures forever. That means it never changes.
Yeshua's last on his commission, book of Matthew 28. What do you say? Teach them to observe all that I have commanded you. Yeah. So, whoa, wait a minute.
No, just like the verse for today, 10:11, and to teach the children of Israel all the laws which Yahweh has spoken to them by the hand of Moshe.
Yeah, exactly. And hold on that. So this now versus later. So if it's not a salvation issue, then is destruction now or destruction later? Protocols of the priesthood, very, very important. It can bring destruction now. But then immediately we start talking about eating clean and unclean, animals that are for food and animals that are not for food. What parts of the body are food and what parts of the body are not for food. Okay, so it talks about that. So if we violate that, do we lose our salvation? No, but it can bring destruction later. Because why? Because people wonder why we get older and then we have issues with our hearts. We have issues with our organs. We have diabetes issues and what do you got? Different types of diabetes, or early onset diabetes, late. We bring it on ourselves by drinking too much corn syrup, Cokes. will destroy our pancreas and we'll lose the ability to produce insulin within our body. So we got to take it on the outside. Why? Because we are following our own, and we separated ourselves from here because some reason we have to separate. That was then and this is now, and we're smarter now. If I just cook my pig long enough, I don't care how you dice it up. You dice that pig up into cubes, or you grind it into sausage, or however you want to do it, it's still not clean, right? You can't make it clean. You can't cook it long. Don't you think when they made pig back then, they cooked it on a fire? It was still unclean because it's not food. That was never meant to be food. So
They've proven that some of the parasites that the pigs have are not killed in the cooking process.
right, you cannot kill those parasites. I talked about the image of the X-ray of the man who ate raw pig every day, and when they put him up on an X-ray he was like, I don't feel so good, and there are parasites from the top of his head to the bottom of his feet. Every extremity, you could see the parasites moving around inside of him.
So,
I wouldn't feel too good.
so now he's the food.
So Yeshua's the food?
No, the guy.
Oh, that guy is.
that was
He's
eating
being
So
consumed
now-
by the
So now
parasites.
he's the food.
Yeah. I mean, when something dies, it says in here in the same thing, if something dies in this Torah portion, that's not food for you. Why? Because the parasites that are in the meat, they are still parasites. They need a living being to live off of. And so they begin to exit any way they possibly can because they're looking for a new host. They don't die because the animal died.
And they go straight through the skin.
They'll go through the skin. That's why it says don't even touch a dead animal. Very, very good.
Well, I
And it says,
but not to touch the pig.
huh?
But this declaration between clean and unclean, people don't realize. If you pay attention back to Noah, and everybody says every animal is 2 by 2. But only the unclean are the male and female 2 by 2.
Mhm.
The clean is 7 pairs.
Yeah.
2 by 2. Because people don't realize even Noah knew what was clean and what was unclean by what came into the ark.
Yeah.
And that's not even taught, because really as babies, in your preschool, Sunday school, it's always
2 by
taught
2.
2 by 2. They're all their stuff. So that's what you're ingrained with.
Yeah.
And unless you actually, because that was one of the big verses for me coming into this, was like, that's not what I've been taught. That's not what, in every song or storybook or whatever.
It's all 2 by 2.
Yeah.
And it's like every animal.
And that's
2 by 2.
only a tiny portion of the truth. It was 2 by 2, but the 7 and the 2. Yeah, it wasn't the whole
Yeah.
story. It was only.
Yeah, the unclean were the 2 by 2.
I think they didn't
And the clean.
understand, that's why they didn't teach it, because they didn't understand.
Yeah,
how that was
But I mean, that's
Yeah.
and that's been repeated over and over and over.
Well, I
But it
mean,
explains in Leviticus differentiates between the clean and unclean.
well, why read it? After all, when our traditions told us all about it,
Yeah.
well, I know that story, so why read the story?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Chris, you had something?
I was just going to say it's amazing how the Father doesn't like cannibalism. He's been against this forever. And the same things like pig and everything, they eat anything. And besides the other stuff that eats
They'll even eat each other on the wild.
So it's good that we don't eat that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Jerry, and then Daryl.
We also need to wear our shoes outside because of the defecation of different animals
Uh-huh.
and what is absorbed through the soles of the feet. And the feet have nerve endings for every other area of the body. So is it going to affect the brain if you get it on your great toe? I don't know.
Yeah.
They have found over in the Far East, there is a species of pig that chews its cud.
That's interesting. That's very interesting. Wonder, sounds like a hybrid. Yeah. Right, Daryl?
Well, it's kind of FYI, I was told by a medical technician one time, you can kill the parasites in pork. You have to cook it well done, freeze it, and then cook it well done again. And it will kill the parasites, but you won't go through all of that.
It sounds like shoe leather to me by that point in time.
Oh, yeah, I mean, well, the parasites,
Yeah. Wow. Well, Al Henry on here said there's 20 parasites in pork that cannot be cooked out. So, when Sandy and I get a pizza, it's always cheese pizza. You can't get hamburger pizza anymore at the grocery store or frozen pizza. Totino's, but that's the only one that you can get. You can't get a better tasting pizza. But yeah, I mean, and so what are your choices? Well, you have all sorts of pig on pizzas and some hamburger with it. But I'm just thinking, wow. So on that pizza that has that pig on it, 20 different parasites. And they don't charge extra for it. They wiggle and jiggle and tickle inside you. Woo! Okay, Raina and Chris. Raina.
Carlos says that the nastiest animals, the dirtiest animals are the cleanest animals in the world.
No. I said God put like the pig and also the king animals to clean the world.
To clean the world. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
They're the garbage disposal.
Yeah.
You gotta keep theirs clean, and that's their purpose.
Yeah. You just got to make sure that they don't cross the boundaries. Like they will destroy crops. So you got to make sure they get they don't overpopulate, because they will overrun and destroy our own food source. Now, here's something else. So a lot of people think about, okay, if meat was not really a big part of the Hebrew diet, and we see that they're eating meat during the feast days, and you think about, the garden diet, the Garden of Eden, and the diet that they had there, they weren't even eating meat. They were given every plant, every seed-bearing plant and herb for food, right? But so just here's a thought. When you think about the things that people deal with through the centuries, why meat is part of our diet, and that we're not all vegetarians or all that sort of thing. I mean, they're not vegetarians, biblically speaking. They're not vegetarians that eat meat. But is it possible to grow your own food in such abundance to give you enough calories with the type of foods that we can grow today without the addition of the calories that come from meat? Is it possible?
Yes, as long as you don't use genetically modified seeds.
Okay, I'm going to say no. It's not possible. Because if you live in a desert region, you can't grow enough of your own crops. You're going to have to rely on some other sources. If you have a drought, maybe you have enough, but then a drought comes through, it kills your crop for the year. You're not going to be able to. Isn't it interesting? So therefore, you have all these other meat sources out there that are part of the diet, because the love of the Father is to sustain us. And so we're not commanded not to eat meat. And so meat is part of getting enough calories to eat. Now, and you can grow, I mean, think about this. Before everybody moving to cities and having little places to live, people could grow a year's worth of food in their garden for themselves. I don't know how much you need. An acre, half acre is an abundance for you to make and to can and to keep for yourself, and maybe to share with your neighbors and to swap things with and barter with, and maybe even sell a little bit of it. That's possible. And here's something else. Do you realize they keep telling us that the world is overpopulated? It's not. You can give every family in the world 1 acre and put them all in the state of Texas. Give them 1 acre of land apiece. Think about that. And there's the rest of the world. Are we overpopulated? No. So God has given even enough land. We don't even have enough people to even worry about food shortages. So food shortages are man-made. Somebody controls the food. And so they limit it. They pay farmers not to farm. They pay farmers to overturn their crops. Why? Because they want to sustain prices at a particular level, but they also want to cause people to have to spend more of their money so that they're not able to use it for other things that relate to their own survival. Or
Did you know that Dimmitt fire has made it all the way across the pond? There's an article in the BBC about the 18,000 head of cows that died.
yeah, dairy cows.
And I think they have a cheese processing plant down there.
So isn't that strange? Another local destruction of a dairy. And because I mean, those aren't being raised for meat; those were raised for milk. Yeah. So okay, did I miss Raina?
You know, in my backyard is like rock, okay? The dirt is so hard
There's
that,
the caliche here.
but it's weird because what's weird is because these weeds that grow so doggone big, like they get like this big, this fat, this
Yeah.
round. But you can't grow nothing else will grow in there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, I think that's strange, I mean, the way that works.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. It gives you a sense that Adam was told as part of his curse is that he would have to work the ground by the sweat of his brow. It's going to be hard to get certain grounds to produce. Now, there are certain parts of this country that have the most fertile ground that just grows anything, and so as well as other parts of the world. That's why that whole area in Ukraine, I mean, it's really, really rich, dark dirt. It just grows whatever you want it to grow. But here in the Texas Panhandle, yeah, you have to amend your soil. You've got to mix it. You got to do stuff. That's why we made in our backyard, instead of tearing up all of our ground, we made all of our gardens above ground because we just brought the dirt in, mended it so it has all the nutrients to grow. Yeah.
That's one easy to do at Tall Falls. We didn't have to do anything to our ground and we had the best garden.
Yeah, there you go.
It just grew whatever you wanted. It was able to do it.
That's why out here, cattle, free range cattle does great. So you're not working the ground. The cattle just eat what's naturally coming up. And yeah, so it's good cattle ground. Yeah, Rick.
I've drove all over this country, and the place where you're talking about that is quadruply blessed is right across central Ohio. Those guys out there, it seems like every year it dries up just enough for them to plant their crops. And then it's like, okay, I want it to rain once, an inch this week, and an inch this week, 2 inches here, and an inch there, and they just get it. And they, without irrigating it, without doing anything, they produce 120, 130 bushels an acre. It just goes. And they grow corn there 10 foot tall. It just incredibly blessed land.
Mm.
That's where a lot of the Amish
I was gonna say, isn't that where they are?
Yeah. It's very interesting because then you say, well, isn't that a train wreck that happened in the most fertile soil of America that they ignite on fire to put those toxins in the air to fall out on the most fertile part of America?
But prayer will amend that.
And by the way, and God's given us wisdom how to, even the stuff that grows, that there are particular plants that will destroy the dioxins that are very toxic. And so if we get a hold of some of that food, we can, by eating green leafy vegetables, destroys dioxins. It just destroys them, tears the molecules, destroy those toxic molecules. So, all right, some good thoughts here. So let's go back to this this whole thing with Nadav and Abihu, and here are some thoughts about the strange fire, translated alien fire, unfitting fire, or profane fire. So, anybody here know what Occam's razor is? Occam's razor. Do you ever hear that thought? Occam's razor, I think it goes back to Greek mythology or whatever, but it basically means the simplest meaning is probably the most understood and reasonable answer. Okay? I want to tell you, conspiracy theories out there, you know, aliens and reptilians and all these different things, like they're involved, watch the slit of their eyes. All these videos are out there about all these crazy, crazy ideas. The simplest answer is generally always the correct answer. People will layer upon layer upon layer, and you get all these crazy thoughts. And that's where the media loves to say conspiracy theorists, you know, all that stuff. So let's keeping it simple. Strange fire, translate alien fire, unfitting fire, profane fire. Something that's outside the realm of what is permitted. Okay, that's the easiest thing. They brought something, it wasn't right. But considering the holiness of God, you can't push that boundary. They were in the priesthood. It was their responsibility to bring the incense and put it, you know, all throughout the tabernacle and throughout they were to make it holy. That incense did something to drive out, you know, pests, and, you know, the different flies and gnats and stuff that like to accumulate around blood and all that sort of thing. And it was very potent, very powerful, wrong fire to put in it. God said, you're outside my protocol. So, outside of the realm of what is permitted. In other words, and Tammy's going to like this, failed to observe a boundary. A boundary. Does anybody know why is it important to observe someone's fence line? You get shot. Do you go walking into somebody's door at midnight? Okay. So, because in California, they're disarmed. So you can go in anytime you want. Home invasions, people in, but we have a castle law, right? Somebody comes into your home, you've got the right to protect your family, and they're dead. Armed or not, they come into your house uninvited, they've crossed a boundary, they're dead. Unless they turn around.
Once they turn around, they take that away.
I don't think the sunrise, you can still be a criminal.
Torah.
Oh, Torah. Okay.
It's in Torah that you can't kill somebody in your house if it's daylight.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, no, very good point. So,
Yeah.
yeah, we got the castle law here. Someone, you know how many home invasions,
I don't know what person is either.
y'all can look it up. You know how many home invasions take place in daylight? Yeah. So here we go. And they're becoming more and more common, by the way. So if you do not have I'm going to just tell you right out. If you don't have a way to defend yourself, I like to say that an object that with a trigger that releases a very loud noise with a certain projectile. If you don't have that, I recommend that someone go and get one and make sure you have the proper projectile to put in that. Okay, I'm just saying, because why? because we have a right to self-defense. Okay. And you-
If you don't want a gun, you can get now online anywhere, fully automatic BB guns. They're shooting like 1,200 rounds a second per minute, something that's way on up there.
That'll do the job.
Okay.
You get a 50 caliber BB gun pistol
Uh-huh.
that does the same thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
A 50 caliber air gun.
Well,
Wow.
my mom
Okay.
has
It's
a
been
retired Navy
somebody's old
SEAL.
age, for sure.
My mom asked a retired Navy SEAL due to her certain limitations, what would be the best, and he actually recommended one of those the air cartridge BB guns, because he said that comes out at a velocity equal to the gunpowder.
The first 3 shots. If you ever own one and use one, you're only powerful for the first 3 shots. Then after that, they go down so much. Because I had 2 of them.
So you got to be able to change out that cartridge pretty fast.
Cartridges don't carry very fast.
Yeah. So you, so you need 5 guns with all of them with full air cartridges on them. So boom, 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 or and then the next one. That's not very scary. I like the boom, you know. Okay.
12 gauge.
That's very
Universal language.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whatever you use to get.
Hornet spray. Hornet spray.
That's 25 feet.
Hornet spray does go 25 feet. Yeah. Yeah. If they're not coming in with goggles on or anything like that. And
Most of them don't have goggles or glasses.
so, but you better practice with it.
I get practice with the hornets when you go.
You better be very familiar with that can,
And you have to have it at hand.
and it has to be at your hand. All right. Yeah. Get yourself a Hornet can holster. You put it on the.
They say the bear spray and the hornet spray is more effective than the pepper spray.
Well, I'm not gonna test you.
Okay.
I'm not even, no.
Let's get back to strange fire. We're having too much fun here. Okay. So this is what Nehama Leibovitz said. These 2 men who had been privileged to see God face to face were perhaps so dazzled by the holy presence that they thought they could once again approach the Holy One and present an offering of their own. Now, let's go back and revisit. What was the experience of Nadab and Abihu? Exodus 24:1, and also verses 9, 10, and 11. Now he said to Moshe, "Come up to Yahweh, you and Aharon, Nadab and Abihu, and 70 of the elders of Israel, and worship from afar." Verse 9, then Moshe went up also with Aharon, Nadab, and Abihu, and 70 of the elders of Israel, and they saw the Elohim of Israel. And there was under his feet, as it were, a paved work of sapphire stone, and it was like the very heavens in its clarity. Whoa. But on the nobles of the children of Israel, he did not lay his hand. So they saw Elohim, and they ate and drank. That was Exodus 24. The whole experience is 1 through 11, but I read 1, 9, 10, and 11. So they saw Elohim, and they ate and they drank a covenant meal. So here, these 2 guys they've had an experience under the presence, they saw God. The sapphire stones were like the sky. And so what could have happened with their attitude when they saw, they've been up there, they were eating and drinking. And I'm telling you, when one eats and drinks, they're certainly not eating pig or shrimp, but they're eating and drinking. What are they drinking? It's a covenant meal. It could be wine. It could be even hard liquor. It doesn't say, but they were drinking. So why? Because when you gather for a meal, a covenant meal is done in a time of celebration. Feast days are a time of celebration. They're not somber times. We're supposed to have fun. We're supposed to laugh. We're supposed to enjoy each other. We're supposed to have that time before Yah. Why? Because he's there wanting to have fun with us and enjoying the time. So we tell jokes, we tell stories, we laugh a lot, we play a lot. Like one of the things that Terry said about Michael is be childlike.
I can do that.
Take lots of pictures, create memories. These are what great wisdom. Very simple. Yeah, Rick.
This was Yeshua, right? Because it talks about when Moses wanted to see the Father, he, through the cleft of the rock, he saw a glimpse of him so that he would not die. And Yeshua made the comment, no man has seen the Father but me. So this would have been Yeshua that they were seeing and doing that, right?
Yeah,
Just because you see the glory doesn't not mean that you're seeing the Father's face. It doesn't not say glory.
it said, what does it say? It says, so they saw Elohim and they ate and they drank. And they lived.
It had to be Yeshua. But Yeshua said, no man has seen the Father.
I think you bring up a really good point, because think about this. How does God show himself so that we can relate to him?
Through the Son.
So he has to carry the image of man for us to relate to him. Okay? So, so therefore, I think it's across the board. We can't make things up about him if he is so expressed and manifested himself in a certain way. When Yeshua walked this earth, it was so that the people could relate to every single one of these protocols of walking with God. Think about that. He revealed himself loving the disciples and the people around him, taking care of them, feeding them, healing them, encouraging them. All of these different things is so that people could see who God is. He was the very silly internet. They still have not fixed it. Sorry about that, guys. The internet is glitching on us today. So, but his very presence, his very essence is seen through the image of Yeshua. So here's an interesting thing. Even the fact that he was born, carried 23 chromosomes, gives us even a stronger picture than what they saw eating and drinking at the feet of Elohim. Think about that. Yet, what do they see? They see him. So I look at it as there's this veil that was limited to a few, and yet God coming through that birth canal is like passing through the veil, where then they could literally touch him. They presented, now I believe that was Yeshua and the two witnesses that were presented before Abraham on the third day of circumcision. and they came up to the camp on the day of Passover. I believe it was on the day of Passover. And what did they do? They came into the camp and they ate. So they were physical bodies. But Yeshua did not go on to Sodom and Gomorrah. He didn't go into that city where there was great sin, because only two went. Two witnesses went. How many times, you know, when you, I believe it was Yeshua that stood before Joshua. Yeah. The captain of the host. Yeah. Yeshua. So I believe that was him. I'll tell you this, isn't it very interesting? Yeah, Joshua said, "Are you for us or against us?" And he said, "Neither." That should shift a lot of paradigms, because how many times do we say, well, you know, that country over there is not, it can't be, you know, we represent God and they can't. And you have these wars going on. Is one side representing God, another? No, because he's not going to take a side of our own human conflicts. But that story with Joshua goes on, because he was the one that led them, I believe, to the defeat of the Canaanites and led them into the promised land. So anyway, that's a whole other thing. Jackie.
Well, I was just going to say that the more relationship I've had with him, the stronger my relationship is, the more he has manifested in different ways. And so he's here. His presence is here. He's here. You know, if you try to walk in obedience too, I think that's part of it.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, he comes to the ones that are in the pit and hell too to save them. So, you know, or not in hell, but you know what I mean. When you're in a bad place.
Yeah. So and another thought that I have is that when the two disciples were walking on the road to Emmaus, and Yeshua appears to them and they didn't recognize him, but he told them about himself throughout the Torah, the writings, and the prophets. Okay. So I'm going to tell you, so he manifested himself, and then when they broke bread, they saw him.
You recognize him.
So therefore, you know, think about this. Yeah. How do we see him today? Well, we study out the Torah, the writings, and the prophets, and the Brit Hadashah. What do we do? Because eat the bread. Eat the breads. Like, yeah, we talked about that on the last day of unleavened bread, when those of us that gathered, we talked about eating the bread. Why? Because you're supposed to gather enough. We're in the time period of the counting of the Omer. And so you're supposed to go out early in the morning and gather an Omer for you and your family. And whatever you gather, it'll be enough. And on the sixth day, you get twice as much, so that you have enough left over for the Shabbat. So what do you do with the Omer? Is that in the counting of the Omer, every day we want to gather food for us to live on. Man shall not live on bread alone, but by every word that comes out of the mouth of God. And where were they? They were in the midbar. They were in which is in the wilderness, or the place of the word. Debar, midbar, debar, the word. And as I talked about on Wednesday, in talking about that whole gathering of manna, of what is it or who is it, and the whole idea of the collection of it, it actually has the roots tied to word, debar, word. What do we do when we're going through and we're counting out the Omer? We're counting out the days. We're on day 7 right now. What day are we on? Day 7, right? Started counting on
I had an alert that it was day 8 already. So it's probably
day 8.
9 or 10.
No, it's not 9 or 10. It would count on the day after the Shabbat. So this would be day 7. Unless you're counting like the way that the Jews do it, and they do it on the high holy day of unleavened bread. So they're a few days ahead of us. But nevertheless, we're gathering every day. Why? We're counting down to Shavuot. Why? Because what's offered at Shavuot is when the wheat has been harvested. And now they take 2 loaves of bread made from that wheat, and they wave it before the Father. And the bread is the bread of life, like you said.
And we eat the bread.
And we eat the bread. So every day you get enough to eat, because if you don't get enough, if you didn't get any bread this morning, you're going to be hungry. And what happens to one's spiritual walk when one is hungry? That we have hangry. How many people have spiritually hangry attitudes? You know, it's where you have to rely more and more on your own strength, and you're pushing it through on your own. And does anger ever work? Does the wrath of God bring about the righteousness of God? Or no, does the wrath of man ever bring about the righteousness of God? No. Okay, I divert. Let's talk about this. Going back to Nahab and Abihu. This is what the sage offer for explanations of their failures. Okay? They drank too much wine. They entered the Holy of Holies. They were not wearing the proper clothes. They took fire from somewhere besides the altar. They went outside of Torah commands. They were attempting to exalt themselves as leaders. Have you heard those excuses for them? They may or may not be accurate or not. It says here, Hasidic thought explains that while they may have drank wine, their desire was not for the wine per se, but rather the heightened spiritual awareness that they thought could be obtained through drinking wine. Okay, let me pause right there.
And also there's a scripture about being drunk in the spirit too. It says drunk in the spirit. So you can be drunk in the spirit without even drinking wine.
It says to be filled with the Spirit.
Well, I
But
read
not-
a scripture and a couple of Bibles that said drunk in the spirit.
I would like to see that.
It said better to be drunk in the spirit than drunk in wine, if you want to get technical.
Okay, find me that verse.
I mean, you can drink, I'm not saying that, but when you get drunk in it,
Yeah.
then
Okay.
you're getting into disobedience.
So that's a whole nother.
Yeah, that's a whole nother
It says, "Do not be drunk with wine, but be filled with the Spirit." So,
Well, same thing.
so it's drawing an analogy right there.
But I
Okay.
mean, it's a balance.
So, so the physical inebriation harms us, or it takes us from His presence,
Yes.
as opposed to being filled with His Spirit. Yeah. Okay. So moving on. What I was going to say is, have you heard people say that when they take drugs, it illuminates their mind, so they have a deeper understanding of spiritual things? Have you ever heard that before?
That's a good lie. But I started to say that's going down another route.
Okay. Why do you think people take
Mushrooms, supposedly.
yeah, because the shamans use the coyotes, coyote. Yeah, coyotes. That's really strange.
When you're in a
That's strange.
inebriated state, you're going from one spirit to another spirit.
Okay.
Okay?
Uh,
Just tell it like it is.
And what is that stuff where they get from the?
Mushrooms. Mushrooms.
Yeah, mushrooms.
Supposedly is really.
LSD?
Not the LSD. I forget what it is that.
Fentanyl. No, that's no.
PCP. Angel dust.
Not angel dust. No, it's a lot of these elite like doing this, where they'll all in the presence of a shaman. What do they'll go down to Central America, and they'll take a particular thing. It's none of these that's being said. It has a 3-letter designation. It's not LSD, but nevertheless, when they do it, it causes them.
PCP, she said, I think that's
AC,
PCP, that was the opiate,
P-
I mean, the.
not
Indian stuff.
PCP. But anyways, it opens up their spiritual eye, and they actually will go talk to demons,
Yeah.
and which will give them, honestly, all sorts of technology and answers and things that they bring back. But it's extremely dangerous because they're conversing with demons, fallen angels. Well, I won't say demons, I'll say fallen angels. It causes them to pass through the veil and obtain knowledge in a abominable way. So not a good way to get knowledge. We get our knowledge from God. Okay. But they want a heightened spiritual awareness that gives them physical answers. So not only did they enter the sanctuary to be close to the Almighty, but they did so under the influence of alcohol. So this is a Hasidic thought. As they felt this would help them to come even closer by heightening their spiritual sensitivity. And I'm like, okay, all right, whatever. So I don't agree with that, but that's what they teach in Hasidic circles. However, so here's the however, we interpret the phrase strange fire. The point is that they have improperly entered into the presence of Yahweh. Consequently, in measure for measure, punishment, they are consumed. It is no coincidence that the Torah utilizes the same phrase of Elohim's consumption of the offering upon the altar and the devouring of Nadav and Avihu. So Leviticus 9:24, and fire came out from before Yahweh and consumed the burnt offering and the fat on the altar. When all the people saw it, they shouted and fell on their faces. And then Leviticus 10:2, and fire went out from Yahweh and devoured them, and they died before Yahweh. So, and it goes on saying, in the episode of Nadav and Avihu, we have seen fire mentioned 3 times. The first is the fire from heaven that consumed the burnt offering and ushered in the presence of Yahweh. That's 9:24. The second was the strange fire offered by the 2 sons. That's in 10:1. Then the third was the counter fire from heaven. And the message is simple and serious. We've been entrusted with the fire of the Almighty. Fire warms and is a light, but it also burns. That Yahweh Elohim is the same yesterday, today, and forever, and he's a consuming fire. I think that should be really sobering for us to really think about this. So 3 types of fire: fire that consumed the offering, the strange fire, and the fire that consumed the 2 sons. Yeah. Okay. Who did I see? Daryl?
It really doesn't matter what the technical thing they did. It was done out of rebellion. That's why they were punished. They rebelled against God.
That's a really good point. I'm going to back that up. How about Deuteronomy 4:23? Take heed to yourselves, lest you forget the covenant of Yahweh, your Elohim, which he made with you. In verse 24, for Yahweh, your Elohim, is a consuming fire. Right? A jealous El.
He's jealous of everything, okay?
Hebrews 12:28 and 29. Therefore, since we are receiving a kingdom which cannot be shaken, let us have grace by which we may serve Elohim acceptably and reverence and godly fear, for our Elohim is a consuming fire. I think that's really sobering. We just think about, if we think about being rebellious, so we're native, and here's the question. Were Nadab and Avihu rebellious to the extent of disobeying an explicit command of Yahweh? So were they just that rebellious?
Yeah, because they got caught on fire.
I mean, think about it. When we have a disobedient child and they're just being, who's had, teenagers, right? And there's just, and you're just like outright rebellion. How do you deal with that? Were they like this? Is that what they were like?
I don't think so.
I think they were more like where they built the calf and everything, where they actually said, this is, a day unto Yahweh. Or they, in their minds, that's what.
They were priests, they knew better.
That's the whole thing there. They knew.
They disobeyed.
Should have known.
Okay.
They had the selfish spirit within them that they did it on their own. They didn't think, oh, that's what we're doing.
So how many times do we make excuses for just a little bit of sin
For other people,
for ourselves?
Well,
That we
that's
say,
good.
well, it was just a little white lie, or
yeah.
it was just, I just picked up a Coke at Shabbat. I just picked up a Coke on my way in.
That's why there's repentance. You need it.
Because I did make someone work for me, even though, because they're already working, or, you name it, just a little bit of thing. And it's just a little enough of
It's just big enough.
outside of that border, outside of that boundary line. It was just one stick for the fire. Think about that. I don't think they were outright completely just in your face rebellious, but what they did by being disobedient, they broke the protocol. Then that dash of rebellion caused complete death.
That's like
It was a now death as opposed to a later, a progressive death, a shortened life, as opposed to leaving out their fullness. It was just immediate.
a tree of life, and then you got the tree of knowledge of good and evil.
Uh-huh.
Acknowledge the tree of good and evil is another way. So if he just did it from the heart, just a little different, then he was being disobedient to the protocol, right?
Yeah.
That's what happened in the garden, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Just that little thing caused a big disaster.
Right. One little
Granted, today
thing.
still.
One little thing. By the way, Bob got the answer right. DMT. DMT.
Thank you, Bob.
Yeah, Bob, how do you know that? No, Bob knows that because he listens to a lot of the same sources I do. So I just couldn't remember it. It's like, I've never tried it, but I just heard of people's experiences. Yeah, DMT. Okay. So let's explore this a little bit more about some possible motives. The Sifra offers the following explanation. So we had a Hasidic explanation. Here's the Sifra. And it says, and Aharon's sons, Nadab and Avihu, each took his censer, so it goes on saying, they in their joy, since they saw a new fire, the heavenly fire, they came to add love to love. Here's a further quote from Rabbi Zvi Shimon. Nadav and Avihu were so overjoyed by God's acceptance of the sacrifices that they decided to add another offering. Their enthusiasm and excitement led them to instinctively perform deeds without contemplating their desirability and taking the proper precautions. The awesome love of God that Nadav and Avihu possessed overshadowed their fear of God. This imbalance, the overflowing of love unchecked by the restraining influence of the fear of God, led to the sin of Nadav and Avihu. In contrast, to the ecstatic, frenzied states, characteristic modes of worship in Eastern religions, the worship of God, as described by the Torah, warns against a loss of control. Love must always be accompanied by the fear of God. It is the combination of the two which creates the desirable state of mind necessary for a close relationship with God.
When you have a holy fear of him too, it's easier to keep yourself in line. Are you gonna slip? Yes, but it's still easier when you fear him. And it's a holy reverential fear, but it's fear.
Yeah. There's a statement here that says, proximity to holiness demands utmost care.
Always ask yourself, is this worth my eternal life?
Yeah, come on, that's good.
Yeah. 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 Or is my mission cut short because I took a shortcut? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So Luke 12:48 says, for everyone to whom much is given, from him much will be required, and to whom much has been committed, of him they will ask the more. That was Luke 12:48. So there was much that they were given. They were given such a high responsibility. So with that high responsibility came a very high cost. Comes at a great price. Let's see if there's any other thoughts. We need to wrap it up on this. Here's a thought. It says that it's most likely that Nadav and Avihu misunderstood their task as priests. They were searching for self-expression and an outlet of their creativity. As a result, they became absorbed in their own ideas. As they sought to continue their worship, they did not understand that it was Yahweh and only Yahweh who determines the framework for his worship. The Torah describes for us in great detail all the laws for worship. When we stray from these forms of worship, we offer up strange fire, even when it is through ignorance. So that's
about 7 different forms of worship too. Main worship.
And with these thoughts in mind, we understand how it may have been possible that Nadav and Avihu may have not had it in their hearts to intentionally sin against Yahweh. Still, because of their training and the holiness that they were to exemplify, mistakes could not be made. And when in the presence of the Almighty, his commands must be followed precisely. There's no room for human initiative arising from human feelings. But it feels right, right? It just feels right. Elohim dealt with them sternly for an offense prompted by the love and yearning for him. Thus, we learn the lesson that our Elohim is holy. Men tend to favor and excuse those near to them, but our Elohim increases his expectations of his chosen ones. Don't we put more expectations on our children the older they get? That what was acceptable when they were 2 or 3 is no longer acceptable by age 5, and what's acceptable by age 10 is a lot different than what it was before. So we put expectations as they grow, and that's why when they're teenagers, we have a lot of expectations, and they're like, no. Because why? Because they still want to act like a 2-year-old at times. All right. Did I have a concluding thought here? Again, and this is where the emphasis, I think, of this Torah portion really comes down to, is that it comes down to those 2 things. What is the role of the priesthood? Right. To make a distinction between the holy and the profane, and between the unclean and the clean, and to teach the sons of Israel all these statutes. And then we see it reemphasized after talking about clean and unclean animals, to make a distinction between the unclean and the clean, and between the edible creature and the creature which is not to be eaten. And I think that's really what it boils down to. This whole Torah portion, we see it in our protocol before God. We see it in the protocol that he gives us to live. We can choose to violate the protocols, and it brings destruction upon our own bodies. And honestly, our example, I mean, we see somebody doing one thing, and it's like, I thought the instruction book said that we shouldn't do that. But if it causes someone now to stumble, to question, I mean, after all, if I went and got, what is that one brand of meat? It's an organic meat at the grocery store. Open range. You can get the vegetables and stuff in the same. Is it at United? It's impossible. That's not even meat. Yeah, that's soy. Gives you a whole year of estrogen in one hamburger. But no, it's in the green and orange label and white. They in the grocery store, it's an organic label as well at United. Anyway, we go to if someone were seeing me pick up that package, 1 pound package of ground beef, and buy that, and we know that that's been halal. I mean, it's been offered. And instead of getting the one next to it, which I think is the Open Range or Open 8 or something like that, that does not have the halal label, then if I cause my brother or sister to stumble because I picked it up and I ignored not to eat meat that's been sacrificed to idols, then what did I just do to their faith? Because they see me do that, then they're not only going to say, well, it's okay for me to eat this, but they're also going to say, they're going to take that little mistake and they're going to go a little bit further with it. And then and the next person's going a little bit further with it. And then all of a sudden everything becomes mixture and mushy. Yep. And it also shows, well, I'm set apart, but I'm not completely set apart, because that's the only ground beef that's left. It's a halal. So I need to have that for my spaghetti. And that compromise, like, well, no one saw me do it. But that compromises my own spirit when I know that's halal and I picked it up and I put it into my spaghetti and I ate it anyway, willingly, knowing that's been sacrificed to an idol, and I ate it. What am I doing? Am I going to die? No, but my faith has now had a chip of destruction put on it. And it's one little compromise that says, well, nothing happened there, so I'll do this other little compromise. And I'm no longer any different from the people of this world that said, well, I just worship on Sunday instead of Saturday. Because I don't want to break a tradition, because it'd be too hard. I'll lose too many friends, or whatever the purpose. I'll lose all my social business networking possibilities, or whatever you want to say. I mean, Christmas, same type of thing. What does it show by our actions? Yeah, Tammy, and then Terry.
Something else that you've got to watch out for, which I've run across with pediatric home health. A lot of these formulas these kids are being prescribed with, they don't get a choice. It's whatever the doctor decides. Some of it is halal, some of it is kosher, and some of it is kosher and halal.
Yeah. You gotta watch for that kosher. A kosher's okay. You just gotta watch for that Arabic writing on the label.
Yeah.
It says halal in English too, but
It says halal in English.
So
But, these parents and kids, those kids, when they are prescribed a specific
they don't have a choice.
But I'll tell you this, now if I go to someone's house and I don't know that they got the wrong package of meat and we have spaghetti,
Need a different meat if you can't find any.
I am free from that problem because I ate it in good health, in good faith, believing that it was okay to eat. But once I find out that it's been offered to Islam, had an Islamic blessing on it, then now it's violating my conscience and I can't eat it.
If you
So-
have any doubt there's something wrong, don't eat it.
So,
Other meats.
so it also goes to say, hey, you tell somebody, I just want to make sure, hey, I'd love to come to dinner. Just make sure on that label it doesn't have halal on it. I mean,
A lot of people don't even understand what that is.
yeah, most people don't. So I'm not being picky or anything. It's just I don't want to eat anything that's been sacrificed to an idol, and that might open a whole nother. They say, well, what's wrong with you? I mean, it's like what? No, I mean, just honestly, to be honest with somebody, it's like I'm not trying to be like super religious. I just want to do what's right, and people don't understand, and maybe it's a good teaching moment if you bring it across in love. You say not like a Torah police hammer.
Paul said, meat sacrificed to idols is just meat, but it makes the brothers stumble on you.
Yeah, and in Acts chapter 15, it says, don't eat meat sacrificed to idol. Teach them these four things, and one of them is meat sacrificed to idol. Don't do it. That's the basic, and then we build on it from there. So, from the first council of Jerusalem. All right, so, all right, really good stuff. Zoor,
It also
strange.
says,
I don't want to
"To him that
commit.
knoweth to do good and doeth it not, to him it is sin."
And it does good, and does it not, it commits sin. Right. So, strange. Zoor. Just think about it. Do we really want to violate that relationship, that intimate relationship that we have with God?
It's not gonna be, you're not gonna have fun all the time if you follow God, you're gonna have to be broken a little bit, okay? You're gonna have to go through some fire to quit sin. I've been there, I know.
And you can have the best relationship with the Lord, but when He shows you something, sometimes it's really hard to shift.
Yes.
It's like
You're in some.
that's where a lot of people now. We get critical about the churchianity and stuff. There's a lot of good intentioned people that are believers. They don't understand, and they bring up something. They're like, that sounds religious. They have a veil. They don't understand. But you know what? You just drop the nuggets and you
All you do.
show them.
You can't please everybody.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. All right, let's close in prayer. Father, thank you for the time that we've had together and to share and to talk about these elements of that are in this Torah portion, that you would help us to see, even in our own lives, no matter how long we've been following Torah, to be able to say, did I compromise the word here? Is this teaching to be clean versus unclean? Am I teaching the right thing, that which is holy versus that which is profane? That, Father, in my words that I use, in the actions that I live, even to the things that I eat, is it a light or does it cause people to compromise? Father, we want to walk this out, not so that we can be burdened by it, but so that we can be freed by it and to walk truly in the freedom that you provided, because you came that we might have life and that more abundantly. So, Father, we just thank you for helping us to walk through, to understand compromise and distinction and how it might be affecting our lives. And we thank you in the name of Yeshua.